Rev up your engine! Today I'm going to show you a very common problem as they age. You start up this Camry and the engine rattles. We're going to try to fix it with a can of oil cleaner. Yeah, it sounds absurd, but let's see what happens. Okay, started. Now, the man bought this vehicle 30,000 miles ago for $1,500. And it's only been the last week that this rattle started up. Now, many things can make this noise, but this is a Toyota Camry. And I found there's really only two things that make the noise. One, the timing chain that moves the cam has an adjuster on it that's hydraulic. And if it gets clogged up with carbon and dirt over the years, it won't tighten the chain when you first start it up. But when the oil pressure of the engine builds up, then the noise stops because it's pushed it in. It isn't making any noise. This is variable valve timing. The variable valve timing cam actuator, you can see in the picture up there, they can go bad, and that's a relatively expensive repair. You got to take the engine all apart. You got to replace that assembly that's got the variable valve cam system in it. That's expensive, but a lot of times it's just because the tensioner isn't pushing out right. Even replacing the tensioner isn't a cheap job. But if you've found these ATS guys that I talked about, their fuel and oil cleaner, this can clean the carbon out as little as 15 minutes. We're going to pour it in the engine, let it idle at about 1,500 RPM for about 15 minutes. Again, make sure you get the oil system treatment. It's for engine oil only. So we'll just take the oil cap off, pour the whole can in. Like I said before, it smells cool. Smells kind of like turpentine. But these guys spent $1 million in 8 years trying to figure out how to make this stuff, using supercomputers and all kinds of analytics. We'll see what it does. And we'll start it up. Now we let it run at about, 1,500 RPMs for about 15 minutes. Okay, we actually idled it for 20 minutes. We're gonna empty out the old oil, all the dirt in the cleaner, and put new oil in. What the cleaner does is, that tensioner needs too much pressure to pop it out. Well, if you use your head, pneumatic and spring loaded, right? Well, a spring isn't going to get harder to pop out as it ages. And anything, it's going to be easier because it's got less tension. It's not going to have more tension, right? It slides on a rod. That gets carboned up until the oil pressure gets high enough. It won't push it, and that can make the clang. We just want to pray that it's not the variable valve timing sprocket that's making the clang, because that's an expensive job, as I said before. So we'll jack it up and get a jack stand to change the oil. And of course the oil drain pan. This is 14 millimeter up here. We'll take it off. I find you get a nice extension like this. It's long. Then when you put it on and pull, and it's easy to get off. You don't want to spend all day pulling and not getting it off. Then you can just use your fingers. But use gloves like me. It can get hot and messy. If you use a glove, you got no worries. Out comes the old dirty oil. There it goes. Now if you watch my videos, just always get a new gasket. Guess what I have? I got a bag of them there. They fit almost every Toyota, but for your own car, heck, 10 or 20 of them from Amazon, they don't cost much. So it'll be on tight and it won't leak, because if you use an old gasket, guess what happens? Sometimes they'll crack when you tighten them, then they'll leak. A new one's not gonna crack. And in this case, don't make a mistake others do. The old gasket, see, it's all worn out. It was stuck on there. Make sure you remove it before you put the new one in. Now you see there's a couple drips coming out. Believe me, you'll never get it all out. A couple drips means nothing. Get it finger tight, then tighten it. Now, Fanatic will use a torque wrench, but now it's finger tight. So what we do is we get resistance. Give it another few degrees. That's plenty tight. It'll never come off, and it won't strip. A filter tool and remove the oil filter. So set it up. Then you can get the rest with your hand. Now it's going to make a big mess, so that's why you wear gloves. See all the goo's coming off? Let it drip a little before you finish the job. Then you get the oil filter. Dip it in the oil so the seal has lubricant, because if it doesn't, it may stick on. Then you just screw it in. You wiggle around a little. And of course now it's raining. It always rains when you get under a car. That's just the nature of things. You get a towel so it doesn't slip. And tighten it as tight as you can with your hand. That's good. Wouldn't you know it'd start pouring rain in the middle of a job? Well, that's life. All right, the deluge has stopped, at least for the moment, so we'll get our funnel and we'll get our engine oil. Now make sure you get the right kind. This is made for 5W30. Use 5W30. It flows better. You want it to flow fast so the tensioner pops out. Some people are very foolish in these Toyota engines because some of these four bangers burn oil. And they say, I'll put heavier oil in. It'll burn less oil. But then it flows worse, and it'll make the engine clang. I even had a guy, his engine made no noise at all, but it was burning oil, so he thought, I'll put 2050 oil in. He did, and then it immediately started clacking when he started up. So stick to the original oil that it was designed for. The engineers know what they're doing. All right, now it's full. Don't forget to put the oil cap back on. I've had more people do that. It'll make an oily mess, but even worse, if you run out of oil because it's splashing out, you blow the engine out. I had a guy who went to one of those quick lube places. They did that, his engine blew up. He had to sue the company to get another engine. So we'll let the jack down slowly. You don't want to bounce and break things. I know it looks cool when they really bounce, but take your time. And I've already moved the jack stand. Make sure you move it out of the way and don't jack it down on a jack stand and punch a hole in something. And now we're gonna start the thing up. Notice you didn't hear the giant rattle. And it was raining for quite some time, so the engine got cool enough. In this case, it fixed. But if you're not a lucky sort like this man was, you could have a problem in the variable valve timing. The actuator that's bolted on to the end of the camshaft can wear and make that noise, and then you need some very expensive parts to replace. But from my experience on these engines, it's often just the tensioner, because he told me himself, he said, you know, it really makes the noise when I get low on oil. Well, of course, when you're low on oil, guess what? It takes even longer for the oil pressure to build up to the top of the engine to push the tensioner in so the chain doesn't rattle. Now, this is also a double-blind experiment, because this thing being old and used and being that 4-cylinder engine, it burns every couple of weeks about 1 quart of oil. So he's going to be driving this thing around, and after he drives it a month or two, we'll see if it's burning less oil. Because if he's lucky, he's going to get a 2-for-1 in this. Since these have low friction piston rings, instead of being high tension that hold them in tight, these are the low friction ones that have less friction, so they get better gas mileage, they work more efficiently, but they don't seal as well. And when they get old, if there's dirt in the oil, they can stick inside the piston instead of expanding out. It's the tension that makes them expand out. Realize the piston rings don't actually sit inside the piston. They go in a groove, but the pressure that they have, the tension, makes them expand to seal against the side of the cylinder wall. And if they're dirty, these low tension rings can stick in. So we're gonna see in a while, a few months, I'm going to Rhode Island now, so when I come back to Tennessee, I'll see what's happened to this car to see, does it burn less oil now? Be an interesting experiment. It quieted the noise, so he's happy. Now, if it stops the oil burning or slows it down quite a bit, he's gonna be enthralled. So stay tuned on this one. And here's some bonus questions and answers. Now here's a bizarre one. It's cheaper to import a Subaru BRZ from Canada than it is to buy in the United States. Now normally everything costs more in Canada, but a lot of it has to do with their taxation structure. It turns out in the US, a base BRZ costs $27,995. While in Canada, it's just $23,427 in US dollars. It's $29 in Canadian, but with the exchange rate, the Canadian dollar is worth less. It's quite a bit of difference. Gee, I wonder if they care about letting the cars come from Canada to the United States. You know, they don't want people to come from Canada to the United States yet. Maybe they'll let the cars in instead, you know? So basically, you're saving $4,500 if you bought a BRZ in Canada than it would cost you in the United States. Now somebody asks Subaru, hey, what's up? And here's what Subaru answered. We price our vehicles to be competitive within the Canadian market, not based on another country's pricing or exchange rate. It's a hilarious thing. Kind of reminds me of the reverse, where drugs in the United States cost a fortune, and the same drug in Canada costs a whole bunch less because Canadians have a pricing structure on drugs, so people don't get ripped off buying drugs. And of course, the drug companies in the United States are saying, don't go to Canada, their drugs are crappy. Well, it turns out the same companies were selling the same exact drugs to the Canadians as they were to the Americans. But since the pills would cost like a penny to produce, and they'd be getting, you know, $5 a piece in the United States, and they sold them for $1.50 in Canada, they were still making a profit of $1.50. It costs so little to make. So this is kind of an interesting one because it's a whole car. You can get it cheaper if you buy the BRZ in Canada than you do in the United States. I find it rather humorous, you know. Who knows how long it'll last, what the exchange rates will be, but you want to take a trip to Canada, come back with a Subaru and save $4,500? Why not? Pete, the missing link, says, Scotty, I got a 2000 Honda Pilot with 205,000 miles. We owned it since new. The timing belt was replaced at 100K. Does it need to be replaced? Is this a job that can be handled by a do-it-yourselfer? Yeah, I would replace it because those aren't interference engines. engines, and it's bizarre about Honda. They keep using timing belts in those Pilots and Odyssey engines, where everybody else is using chains that you never have to think about. They're kind of behind the times with that, but it's not really a do-it-yourself job. If it was a 4-cylinder one, you could give it a try, but those 6s with variable valve timing, you got to have special tools to lock the cams in place so they'll move when you're putting the belt on, and then you'll have a big mess. That's not really a do-it-yourself job on a V6 Honda with variable valve timing. You need too many specialty tools to do it correctly, to hold them in, because the cams, of course, are loaded, right? When you take that belt off, a lot of times they move, and with that variable valve timing sprockets, it's a stinker. You gotta lock them in place before you take the belt off. It's not really a do-it-yourself job. Now, I don't know why they didn't go with a timing chains like everybody else, and you don't even have to think about it, but that's what it is. But I would pay somebody to do it. You don't want to break in. If it breaks, it's good by engine. It's an interference engine. Pistons, lit the valves, and bend them. So yeah, I would change it. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.